Hello and welcome to my workshop. My name is Paul. I'm a luthier and bow maker based in Tasmania, Australia. In this series, I will share some of the projects I work on each week, giving you a glimpse over my shoulder as I work, as though you were looking through the window into my workshop. In this week's episode, I bush and fit a new eyelet on a violin bow, cut wedges to rehair the same bow, fit and trim the bone tip on a Fretschner violin bow, and I also finished making one of my own bows. So here we are, starting to drill the old eyelet hole out on the violin bow, and then I'm turning down the plug, and finally we glue this plug in place. Okay, so here we have the frog from this bow that we were bushing the eyelet on. So we drilled out the hole for the new eyelet. I've then run a leading tap, a beginner tap into that thread, and used an old eyelet, which I've cut a sort of turned into a finishing tap, and used that to finish the thread. It's also important when you're fitting a new eyelet to take the corners of the eyelet off, and that prevents damaging the sides of the liner when you're fitting the new eyelet. So that then allows a new eyelet to be threaded in. It's quite firm. It's important. A lot of people you'll see will use the adjuster through the hole to turn the eyelet, and what happens is the threads of the adjuster catch on the sides of the liner, and you'll see sort of grooves and marks in the side of the liner from that. So it's a we then set the and allows the frog to run smoothly in the mortise. There is a little extra wear at this end of the stick, so that allows the frog to sit there. There's no undue movement. It sits nicely. It runs parallel, and there's no twisting, or that's why it's important to get the eyelet fitted accurately in the frog. You can't just drill it out willy-nilly by hand and hope for the best. It needs to be done accurately. And here's the finished bow once I've rehaired it, fitted the hair. Apologies, the footage is a little jumpy. I'm still yet to improve my recording. It came up quite nicely. So we're now cutting wedges. This is when I cut the wedges for that same bow, actually. And this is just a quick run through. This is approximately twice the speed, I believe, I've put this through it. And this is just a tip wedge. So this is just one of the wedges. I always cut my wedges, follow the same procedure. So I trim the front face, and then I trim the width of the front of the wedge, which is the widest point. And then I'll trim the back and get the angles of the wedge correct. And you'll see it here just when it's starting to drop in, and with a little more fine adjustment, it drops right down. We trim off a gap for the hair to come through at the front of the wedge, and then here I'll scallop out the underside of the wedge to give room for the knot of the hair to fit. And finally, you'll see I'll get a file and shape the inside of the scalloped area, and also where the hair leaves the knot and follows sort of out the wedge out of the tip, and that helps the hair to come out smoothly and evenly without getting caught or being cut on any sharp edges. And is a big part in the success of a good rehair, and the hair not pulling out of the frog, as you've seen on some famous occasions with some players, where they'll be halfway through a performance and the hair comes flying out of their bow. That is actually quite a bad failure on behalf of their luthier, in my opinion anyway. So now we move on to fitting this bone tip onto the Frechner violin bow. Because of the shape of the head of a violin bow, once it's finished and carved, if you need to replace the tip, the sort of the traditional method of doing so, some people have made jigs to be able to clamp their tips on. The traditional method of doing it is to use a binding, and bind it on with thread or strong cord, which is what I'm doing here. So I've done some preparatory work on the tip to thin it down and curve it to the shape of the face of the bow, and then just running through again here at about double speed on this video, just to cut down the time it took to watch while there's a bit of an art to it. Apologies again, I jump out of the video occasionally, but you get the hang of it. I've also used quite a long piece of cord when I did this one. I think it's actually a cord for a cello bow tip, so I had to wrap quite a chunk of it back around the bow. What I was trying to do there was give it a close-up look. Really look to get it nice and tight and pulled back, I guess. And after that dries, we'll take the binding off, and start the process of slowly filing the tip back to shape, which is, again, here is double speed. I'm not quite moving this quickly. I'm using my thumb there as a guide. I do it in a clamped in a vise, and that helps prevent any putting any undue pressure on the glue, because the tip is only glued on. So there's obviously a lot more of that, which I cut out of the video. Didn't see the need to bore you with it. And here we're just doing the fine filing down and shaping of the nose on the tip of the bow. This is an area that's often butchered when you see some bows, and they destroy the shape of the tip of a bow. And I'm just using my thumb and first finger to guide the file and prevent it hitting the head of the bow. And again, this is double speed, and even though I'm moving quite slowly, so I'm actually moving even slower than what you're seeing there. And I go through a series of files. This is sort of the largest I use, and then I'll get a number of smaller files to go through and shape the face, and then polish it with a series of sandpaper as well, right down to a jeweler's rouge on a leather block to polish it, do the final polish, which I don't show. Again, just doing some. It was a little tricky to get the angles right so that you got a bit of a view as to what I was doing as well. I just placed the camera and did the work with a bit of an idea as to the fact that the camera was there and I was trying to record it. But the thing with these videos will all be the first aim of my day is to do the work, and then I'm just recording it as I go. So if the recording doesn't come out very well, it's not like I'm going to be reshooting the video, because I'm hardly going to take the tip off and redo the whole job just to get a good video recording. But I'm sure you'll understand and get a bit of an idea as to what goes on with some of these more interesting jobs. So the next clip, I'll also show the same bow. I'll be talking about after I rehaired it, the hair didn't quite fit correctly, and I show how the before and after of fixing that. But you'll get a better look at how the tip ended up finishing up in that clip, just coming up in a moment. So here's a rehair which I completed yesterday. This is actually the bone tip that I did on Frechner violin bow as well. However, you can see just how the hair and the front edge of this wedge is lifting up, and the hair's starting to pull out of the tip, so I'm not happy with that. So I'll look at cutting a new wedge and refitting the hair into the tip. So here's the tip wedge being replaced in this Frechner violin bow. You can see the hair is now coming out nicely, and it's a nice smooth even band. There's no bunching out of the top here, and that tip wedge is holding nicely. So that's that one ready to go. So here we start working on one of my own bows. This is a frog for a violin bow, and I'm shaping the sides of the frog roughly at first with a gouge, and then I'll go through and file it down. You also use a scraper to to take the gouge marks out, and I prefer using the scraper as much as possible over files and sandpaper. However, the finished the finished sort of product is done using a number of fine sandpapers and all the way down to a jeweler's rouge to polish the final product. So having shaped the sides of the frog, I'll now move on to cutting the throat and shaping the nose. I do this mainly by hand, just with a knife. Sharp tools help prevent injury. I was asked by one person whether I sharpen my own tools, and yes, I do sharpen all my own tools. This knife, you'll see I use quite a lot. After approximately 8 hours of polishing, shaped the nose. You can see that on the frog. I've shaped the whole throat and nose. There's a good 6 hours of polishing in the frog alone. The frog is the black ebony part at the end the hair comes out of. You can see I've also put my stamp on that. I didn't quite get it straight on that stick. The stamp is a heat stamp and burnt into the side of the stick. Again, I didn't get the lighting very good on this. My apologies there. So I did include some still shots at the end as well, to show the finished bow. The stick is polished timber only. There's not a varnish on it. There's not a finish on it. It's grain filled. So you fill the grain and then polish it to a high level of shine using various sandpapers, and again right back through to jeweler's rouge. And here I'll show the winding, fitting the lapping and winding, the method that I use to do it. So you start off just by running the winding. It's a silver thread, and you run it, the silver wire, sorry, you run it over itself to create the initial holding ability, so it's run over itself. Then I'll trim the excess off and put that aside, and I'll use that at the end when we run it off, and I'll show you how that's done, or how I do it. I'll just go through the long and laborious process of winding it on. I tension the thread just in the leather jaws of my small vise. There's other more fancy ways of doing this. Some people mount the whole bow in a jig that turns the bow. I've always just run the thread through the jaws of the vise. I can adjust the tension for different sized, different weight, different sized threads, and just run it on using my fingers. I'll jump ahead now and I start looking at where the frog comes in and lining it up to the finishing point. And you'll see once I get it to roughly within half a centimetre of the frog, I will then get the scrap piece of wire here, and I will place that down and run the silver wire over the top, and that creates a small channel which I'll then thread the wire back through to pull off and tie it off. It's quite a tricky process that took me a little while to master, but once you get it right, it's not too bad. I clamp my thumb on it to hold the thread from coming undone, trim it off, and then we'll pull the excess piece out in a moment, but we'll also just flatten off the end of the wire that we're going to thread back through. So that's the end that's wound around the bow. We're just flattening that off, and I'll kink the end of it up slightly so that when you thread it through, it comes up in the gap between the where you've created your little channel. So you just pop it underneath, and because it's flattened off, it feeds through fairly easily. And the key to this working is to pull it through. When you'll see in a moment, I'll grab it with the end of it with the pliers here. And when you pull it through, you need to pull it through in one smooth motion. If you stop and start in the process of pulling it through, you'll generally find it'll catch. One nice smooth motion, and then we pull it quite firmly tight. There you go, nice pull there. But then I'll put the pliers down and give it a nice firm, really nip it in there nice and tight, and tuck it back so that it is not going to come out. And that's what holds the winding on. We then cut a leather thumb grip to go on over the top, and the bow is ready to fit hair in, and tension up for the first time, get some rosin on, and start playing. So that's where we leave it for this week. I hope you enjoyed having a look at a few of the jobs that I did, along with a new bow being finished. I'll leave you with a few pictures of our beautiful state of Tasmania, and until next time, I'll catch you later.